Tim Autrey, and welcome to this resource video for the 7 Natural Principles of Human Performance. If you already have a copy of the book, 7 Natural Principles of Human Performance, great! If not, you can grab a hard copy, Kindle version, or audio version on Amazon. You can also find more information about the book at 7naturalprinciples.com. That's 7naturalprinciples.com. This video is an excerpt from the PPI Human Performance Leadership Masterclass, which is part of PPI Lab. You can access the full course as well as a ton of resources to help you improve safety, reliability, efficiency, productivity, and profitability by joining PPI Lab. More information is available at ppiweb.io/PPI Lab. That's ppiweb.io/PPI Lab. Thanks for being here. Let's get to it. In this episode, we're going to talk about the physiology of the brain, the actual physical makeup, and we're going to keep it relatively simple. I mean, you could go to school for many, many years to fully understand the brain, and I don't think anybody fully understands the human mind, but we're going to keep this very simple. So we're going to say, for our purposes, the human brain consists of 3 parts, 3 primary components. The first one of which is the most involved part of the brain, which is referred to as the neocortex. Now that's the part that's around the top and in the frontal lobes of your brain. And this is where our cognitive thinking, our problem solving, our high-level thinking, logic, all that stuff takes place. The neocortex is the slowest part of our brain, and it also hogs the most energy. So when you are involved in high-level thinking, you're burning lots of glucose. I know that when I'm doing something creative, if I'm writing or doing something like that for any period of time, I find myself craving sugar. So I actually keep some like dark chocolate peanut M&Ms in my desk or some Dove dark chocolate candies. And when I'm doing that, I just, I don't eat a ton of it, but it really, really helps. At least I think it does. It really helps me continue to be creative and keep going. So that's the neocortex. Again, the most evolved part of our brain and the part that consumes the most energy. In the middle, we have what's called the limbic brain, and this is where all your emotions are stored, your memories, basically your subconscious mind, all that stuff's hanging out predominantly in your limbic brain. And because of that, we can kind of think of it that in the grandest scheme of things, this part of your brain, or your subconscious mind, really is the biggest controller of your life, of how you do what you do, the way you do it. And then the most primitive part of our brain, which is about the size of a walnut and hangs out right at the top of our spinal column, is scientifically referred to as the amygdala. Now, the amygdala, from a perspective of being an influencer or being influenced, is hugely important, and it's really critical that we understand this. So we're going to talk a lot here about the amygdala. And you notice we refer to the amygdala as the gatekeeper. And the reason for that is because everything coming in from the outside world, before it's even allowed to the rest of the brain, has to pass through the amygdala. The amygdala works at lightning speed, and it decides whether or not it's going to pass information on to the rest of the brain, which is why we call it the gatekeeper. Now, we have another name for the amygdala, which I think is a little more fun. We call it the lizard brain because it's basically the same level of brain that a lizard has or that reptiles have. Very, very fundamental, very, very rudimentary, has a couple of primary functions, and that's it. So, what do you think the primary function is of the lizard brain? Well, you probably already know this. It's survival. A few years ago, we never even heard about this stuff, but we're learning more and more collectively. And as an influencer, it's really important that you understand the functioning of this part of the brain. So the lizard brain's primary function is survival. So any information coming in from the outside world, it asks a question. And the first question it asks is this a threat? Because its primary function is your survival, if it's a threat, it's going to immediately prompt you to do one of 2 things. Either fight or flight. We've all heard this before. Fight or flight. Your body is likely, if you perceive a threat, your body is likely to get flooded with adrenaline, and everything goes into action to do one of those two things. Now, in our modern world, what do fight and flight look like? If you're talking about a teenager at home, or if you're talking about somebody at work, it usually doesn't get to fisticuffs. So what fight normally would look like in today's modern world, and let's just keep this conversation focused to the workplace, somebody who's particularly argumentative or contrary or disruptive or whatever. Let's say you're having a meeting or you're giving a class or whatever it happens to be, and somebody's just blah, 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 blah. Chances are pretty good that their amygdala has kicked in and they've gone down this pathway. So what's the other one here? Flight. What does that look like in, again, the work context? Well, let's say you're having a meeting and somebody feels threatened by what you're saying, and yet to be professional, they're sitting there and they're nodding, they might even be smiling, but they have completely checked out. They have gone away. Now, that's the first question that the lizard brain asks, and there are a series of other questions. A lot of us are familiar with this one. We're not so familiar with the other questions that this part of the brain asks, and remember, everything has to go through this process before it's ever even allowed to the rest of the brain. So let's take a look at this. So if the answer to this is no, it's not perceived as a threat. And by the way, you have some fill in the blanks here on page 40. If it's not perceived as a threat, then the next question that the lizard brain asks is this complex? Now, why would it ask that? Well, remember, this is the most primitive part of the brain. It's been around pretty much since the beginning of the evolution of man. The original folks that were on the planet, and you think about what life conditions were like back then, they were pretty harsh. Not only were there lots of danger around, there was something that was in short supply during many seasons of the year anyway. What was that? Food. Well, relative to this, the human brain, if you think about it as an organ, it's about 2 to 5% of the body's mass. It consumes about 25% of the body's energy. And this part of your brain, as we already talked about, the neocortex, it's an energy hog. It sucks energy like crazy. So, because the lizard brain is here for your survival, if something appears to be complex, and again, it doesn't necessarily have the capacity to logically work its way through, if it perceives something to be complex, it doesn't even allow it to the rest of the brain. What happens here is it filters it out. It just meters it out. And it does that to conserve energy. Now, I mentioned that the lizard brain asks a few other questions. In your handout, the picture that you're seeing is the leadership handout. I just want to make you aware that there's a couple more questions before the lizard brain finishes its deal here. So we've already gone through this part. Is it a threat? Yes. Fight, flight? No. Okay. Is it complex? Yes. Filters out about up to 90% of anything that's coming in. So what happens if the answer to this, is it complex, is no? Well, the lizard brain asks the next question. Is this unique? Or is it the same thing I've heard over and over and over and over? We've seen that response, I'm sure, many of us with our teenagers at home, when you're ranting on about something that you've ranted on about the same thing and said the same thing over and over and over. I mean, you could just watch the whole composure change. And generally, in that little example, the kids just check out and you're just wasting your breath. So, is it unique? If the answer to that is no, well, it's going to filter out pretty much all or up to 90% of what's coming in. If it is unique, there's one more question that the lizard brain asks. Now remember, its purpose is survival, and this is where we're starting to bridge the gap between survival and desire, okay? So it asks, is this novel? Is this interesting? Is this entertaining? Is it something that is, somehow tickling my thoughts a little bit? Something that I want to pursue further? If the answer to that is no, you're just going to be disregarded. If the answer to that is yes, then you have the opportunity to influence. So, going through this more complex diagram here, let's say you want to influence someone to do something. You need to make it non-threatening, simple. You should come at it from a way that they haven't heard it before, and to the best of your ability, make it intriguing, entertaining, and fun. You know, in our world, and if you are a facilitator or a trainer, any training you want to do, you need to think about this. Now, let's talk about this from the perspective of because a lot of folks that are likely on the other side of this camera here, you're involved in safety, and perhaps you do safety training. Now, what's the classic old recipe in an organization? So you're watching the data and you're watching the trends, and you happen to notice that, you know, 3 or 4 times in the past several months, people have cut their hands. So what we decide to do is we decide to do more hand safety training. And the thing is, yeah, it's the same training that we've already done 7 times over the past few years. So you bring people into the room, and it's not threatening, although they really don't want to be there. It's not threatening, and even because they've heard it, even because, let's say maybe it's not threatening, and you've done a nice job of making it simple, step by step. Okay, so then you're all the way down through here, and then it gets down to this unique question, and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm having to sit through this again. You are absolutely wasting your time. So if you want to influence someone one-on-one or in a meeting or a classroom situation, for goodness sakes, you need to make it non-threatening, as simple as possible. Come at it uniquely. So if it's an issue that's been talked about before, figure out how to talk about it differently or come at it from a different angle. And for goodness sakes, to the best of your ability, make it fun and entertaining. And then you will have the opportunity to influence, okay? So that's what's going on in the lizard brain. Once we get down here, the lizard brain says, okay, I'm going to pass this on to the rest of the brain, and that's where it begins to interface with the other 2 parts of your brain, the limbic brain and the neocortex. And now we're kind of into the conscious realm. So all of this really happens without conscious thought. It happens that quickly. Now we're starting to get into conscious thought. And what's going to happen now is, let's say you're trying to influence me. There are 2 questions I am going to consciously process. And again, it's going to happen real fast. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing it, but I'm going to consciously process. We call this the personal screening process. And here's how it works. So you want me to do something, or you want this young lady on the screen to do something. The very first question her brain is going to consciously ask is, and you've already heard this, is this relevant? What's in it for me? If very quickly I decide or she decides there's nothing in it for her, you have 0 opportunity to influence. Okay? So then what you need to do is you need to come at it from the perspective of what's in it for them. So let's say you want to influence someone to, let's use a very, very simple example. You're having problems with a particular individual. She's not wearing her hard hat. She'll put her hard hat on when she sees you coming around, you know, PPE, safety thing. But she just doesn't want to keep it on, and you want to influence her to keep her hard hat on. Well, the classic approach would be, look, if I catch you again without your hard hat on, I'm going to write you up. There's going to be a letter in your file. In some organizations, that's even a firing offense because it's a safety issue. Yada, 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 yada. Compliance, 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 compliance for the good of the company, for the sake of our numbers, all of this. Well, what you would want to do, rather than approaching it that way, is you would want to, with your understanding of who she is and where she's coming from, you'd want to come at it from a perspective of what's in it for her. When you do that, you will then have the opportunity and the ability to continue through this screening process. Now, how do you know how to do that? Well, that's what the individual performance model is all about, that we're going to talk about here in the next couple of episodes. So just for this point, what's in it for them? That's got to be the perspective. Then, so you come to this young lady and you've made it through there, and she sees there's something in it for her. Then the next question her brain's going to process is, can I do this? Do I have the ability? If it seems too hard, you're going to have 0 opportunity to influence. So then your strategy is you want to make everything as fast, simple, and easy as possible. Now, you may ask the question, well, what if I'm wanting her to do is not fast, simple, and easy? Well, then you want to chunk it down. You want to break it down into small baby steps. Check this out.
Baby steps?
It means setting small, reasonable goals for yourself, one day at a time. One tiny step at a time.
Baby steps.
For instance, when you leave this office, don't think about everything you have to do in order to get out of the building. Just think of what you must do to get out of this room. And when you get to the hall, deal with that hall, and so forth. You see?
Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Oh, boy. Baby steps. Baby steps. Baby steps through the office. Baby steps out the door. It works. It works. All I have to do is take one little step at a time, and I can do anything.
So when you do that and you successfully come at whatever it is from a perspective of what's in it for them, and you make it fast, simple, and easy, then you have the opportunity to influence. And this is where we begin to enter what we're calling the individual performance model, which is where we're headed in the next episode. Episode 7, we're going to work our way through the model, and what I can tell you real quickly is you're going to get in the next episode or next couple of episodes about the equivalent of about 4 to 6 years of college-level psychology. And what we figured out how to do is to put this in one simple, understandable model. The individual performance model, I mentioned this to you before, when you understand this and you effectively employ your understanding of this, you can get virtually any other human being to do virtually anything you want them to do. And this includes, if you're in an organization, it includes upward, sideways, people that report to you, people that aren't even in your department, all directions. When you're at home, it includes your significant other, your spouse, your children, your grandchildren, even rebellious teenagers. It's a magnificent model, and we're going to be talking about that over the next couple of episodes. So hang in there. Again, I'll tell you from our experience of having taught this for many years now, this is one of the pieces, this particular model that's coming up is one of the pieces that people say, this is what brings it all together for me. So what we've done to this point in this course is we have done our best to build a platform to get your level of understanding and awareness to a point where now you're ready to really dive in to this model. Talk to you in episode 7.